I'm an agnostic atheist. I'll be the first to dunk on organized religion and call it ridiculous and say the people who follow religion are some of the most immoral people. But on the other hand, given I'm an agnostic atheist and what I've seen in my life, I err towards there's more than this bullshit. Absolutely. So while I don't believe in any God and could never join any religion because it's so ridiculous to me, a lot of the shit they do seems so evil and so wrong. I err towards more being a faith type in the sense hardcore atheists, sure, they're chimp mind. Even if they're smartest of all the chimps, they think they know what's up. They don't know what's up. I know they don't. And I've seen too much shit in my life, too much intuition that is shocking to believe that there's nothing more than this bullshit. The most cut and dry, sterile explanations of life. I probably shouldn't have filmed this while eating, but a lot of vloggers do, so I guess I will too. Given I have no audience, it doesn't really matter, does it? There's so many times where I've had like ridiculous intuition and I know something, and when I actually go research my hunch, it turns out to be true. I mentioned the time I mentioned the time they forced me in a facility and I had visions that later happened. But honestly, that's like small potatoes versus other shit. Like, um, I'll hear something and I'll know it's a message, right? I'll just get a gut instinct like this is significant. This is something. There was this song that really hit me, and due to the content of the song, I said to myself, I know my dad's mother died at 21 based on this song and how it's making me feel. And so I literally then went out of my way to do research because I had no idea when my dad's mom died. And he turned out, yes, he died when he was 21. You're telling me if you can get a literal fucking message and it hits in your gut and you know, oh, that must be the case. And then you research it and it turns out to be fucking true of all the years of your life. It's that one. And I was right. That's not a greater than chance thing. But it's multiple times. Like I know you guys in your little orbiters, like that B-rate drag queen, like to make parodies when I make videos of a trashy psychic who has visions and stuff. You guys need it to be true. There's nothing more to life than money, right? You need that to be true. Like you've made your choice. You've made a choice to be pure fucking evil just for money. So of course you need to believe there's nothing more. And any awareness your dim brains may be having of like intuition or signs there's more than this shit, you need that to be not true. So you're kind of biased the other way as me, where I'm open and neutral. I laugh at organized religion, but in the idea that there's more than this bullshit, and there's like and it's true, human consciousness is more than we consider it to be like a hallucination of a biological machine, like just a complex bacteria, complex life form. You know, you guys need that to be true. I don't need that to be true. If anything, given what I'm going through, it would actually feel better to be able to believe there's more. So, if anything, I'm biased the other way, right? But in addition to my acknowledged bias, the probability of shit that I have seen, thought, had visions is very fucking unlikely to be chance, given how many times it's happened. I should talk about my great great granduncle, who's a saint, right? This dude was born in Altavilla, Irpina. That's my great grandmother's village. Her name was Pellegrina Angelina Crescitelli, and his name was Alberic Crescitelli. And They were lived in Alta Villa Irpina. Obviously, my grandmother emigrated to Ellis Island and moved to New York. I'm sorry, Newark. He moved to Newark with her husband, Americo Villi. That is my great grandfather. But she had an uncle who was relatively high ranking in their village. His father was a pharmacist, and his mother was a super crazy Catholic. They likely had some kind of manic tendency. I think that they have a manic tendency. I suspect my grandfather was bipolar. At the time, they didn't call what he had bipolar, but based on secondhand reports of the kind of shit he would go through, he seemed bipolar to me. And you see this tendency where, like, it's ironic because I came to my observing cases of families. I said, it seems like in families with like a manic tendency or bipolar, some relatives will be like weird to impulsive criminality and just like unhinged behavior. Some will be creative and unconventional, and some will just be psychotic. But it's not like a schizophrenic psychosis. It's like obviously with like grandiosity and manic like edge. And all those things end up be true of my Italian family on my great grandmother's side. In the sense I have a saint, I've got a felon, and I have just a psychotic patient. Yeah. So I speculate that side of my family has maybe a manic like tendency. And you see this where on that side, my grandfather would have had bipolar. His brother was like this weird felon who kept breaking laws and doing impulsive weird shit. And their uncle bolted out of Italy to go to China, became entirely culturally Chinese, took on a Chinese name, dressed totally Chinese except for Catholicism, and he was converting people to Catholicism. It's like there are these ancient Chinese pictures of the dude, totally culturally Chinese. I can't even pronounce his Chinese name, but he went to this province in China because it had super high rates of opium addiction. He was trying to like preach Catholicism to get them clean and help them, and it was working. They were cutting down on the drug trade. And guess what happened next? While this was going on, the Boxer Rebellion, which was like a xenophobic nationalist movement in China to kick everybody out who was an outsider, was going on. So even though the region of China they were in was not where the Boxer Rebellion was taking place, but the sentiment was rife throughout China, kick out all the outsiders, right? And that's how we have Han nationalism today. The communist movement in China was always a very ethno-nationalist movement. To this day, China is very Han ethno-nationalist. And this kind of started around this time with the Boxer Rebellion and later the Chinese Communist Revolution, where very, contrary to Western leftists, they're very like kick everyone out, just uplift the Han Chinese. But it was all leftist in nature because they slaughtered the elites and established communism. And the Chinese Communist Party is in power today, obviously. You could go to a museum in China and they have a wax figure of my great granduncle. You can kick his ass. They have like all the outsiders purged from China museum, and my great great granduncle is there. Isn't that wild? To this day. And while I'm saying this, so he's over in China doing his crazy Catholicism. He went to become a priest. He went to school for 8 years, and he said, "I gotta go heal these people. I don't care about my life. I gotta do this." And let me tell you, Having a poodle, get ready for the clingiest ass dog who never leaves you alone. Tutu, baby, let me eat my dinner. You got your dinner over there. So he was communicating with his mother, who was also super Catholic, while this was going on. There's one communication where she goes, "It's very dangerous in China because of what was going on with the ethno nationalism." And he said, "If I die, I die. I need to do this, right?" And I remember reading this, and I had no idea it was targeted to be slandered. And I remember making jokes like, "This is like me. I want to take less money to help people who need help." I had just taken a job with a pay cut to help the most disregarded, the real underclass of America, which is mentally ill drug addicts. And that's who I wanted to work with. And I had no idea the same global criminals that would kill him were about to kill me. And I made jokes. You can go check my Twitter account. I said, "Wow, this is like it must run the family. Like I'm gonna Photoshop my face as a saint." I was making jokes, but I literally had no idea I was gonna go out the same way in a few days. So anyway, this news story. So it is working, and they're cutting in on the drug trade. There's people quitting dope. And obviously, the people selling the dope, the people trafficking the dope all over the world, many of whom probably rule the Illuminati today, they didn't like that. So they went to these fucking uppity Catholics who were trying to like heal the sick. And they told the people, especially because they knew ethno nationalist sentiment was high in China already, they were like, "These outsiders, these white Catholic exploiters, they're hurting you. Like they're secretly in secret, they're fucking raping your women and they're fucking you over." It was a lie. I mean, granted, there were plenty of exploiters in China, but they basically took the people who were actually trying to do good and fight these global gangsters who were hooking them all on dope, and they said everyone is like that. And they specifically targeted them to these people, specifically my great granduncle, right? And so a mob forms because they had been riling them up. And originally his Catholic friends there were hiding him and helping him, right? But as the mob grew, they realized you're on your own. It's just like me. They all, because it was too powerful and there was too many people. And the last thing he said to the mob before they got him was, "What have I done? What is my crime?" You know, to me that says innocence, because if you did shit, you would know why they're there. And another reason I think it's a lie is they claimed he was like assaulting all these people. But I don't have a single relative. Like you would think by now, like given we're pretty close genetically, like great great is not that far in terms of DNA. I don't have a single relative from that region of the world, which suggests he was a pious priest and he wasn't actually doing all that shit. When they slandered the shit out of him, they said he was raping everybody and all this stuff, right? Um, Pretty much think it's a lie. And so does the Catholic Church. And yeah, so they torture him for 2 days and cut his head off, right? And this is where it gets real wild, right? The Vatican decides to make him a saint in November of 2000, after decades and decades of him dying for Catholicism to the point he was a saint, dying to help the sick against oppressors, right? And they say, we should we need to honor this dude. And they do it in November of 2000. New York Times has an article where my cousin in Jersey City, I live in Bayonne, I was born in Jersey City. My cousin in Jersey City, who still has the surname Crestapelli, um, was invited by the Vatican to go watch the whole sainthood ceremony thing, right? And this was released by the New York Times in November of 2000, right? And I would be targeted by the same global gangsters who manipulate mobs the next year in November. Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? And then 22 years pass, and I would not discover any of this until a few days before the first time they would attack me. You're trying to tell me that's chance? And I want you to keep in mind, they didn't come to me with this shit. I found all this independently. Went about my life and just found this information, right? The stuff they do is so one-dimensional. It's so obvious. Like send somebody who's a psychic to say you're not going to be raped like 10 years before it happens. Like they're considering how much power they have, they're really, really bad. They can't, these people with all their power can't be as impressive as the fucking universe. And I want you to think about what's the probability of all those things aligning, that I would have a great granduncle who committed his life to helping the sick and wanted to sacrifice to the point before I even know our life paths are totally the same. I say I'm like him and I make jokes I should be a saint. That would happen before I knew I was going to go out to the same way, to the same people, global criminals, slandering people, making scapegoats do their crimes. What are the odds that would happen? What are the odds when after decades and decades of him being forgotten, he was remembered as a saint, would happen literally 1 year before I would be targeted by the same criminals to repeat that cycle? That would happen the same month, 1 year earlier, when I was going through a mental health crisis, and I would be targeted 1 year later. And what are the odds? All these things aligning, that I would discover all of this, all those decades of time and coincidences, a few months before I would find out I'm going to go out the same way. That despite me living my life trying to help people and having that in my heart and soul, the same global criminals that set him up to be tortured and beheaded are now setting me up to be raped and tortured through slander. I would find that out a few days before it would happen, the first attack, after this being in waiting 22 years. What are the odds of all those things aligning? The shit they do with all their money and power and brains, the few brains they have in their cult, the few times they're not yammering, all there is me, there's no God but me, money, money, money. What are the odds all those things would align? The probability. And you're telling me there's not more than this bullshit? I know there's more than this bullshit. That's why I'm an agnostic atheist. And I honestly think that happened so I would know, despite the fact I'm not religious, that there's more than this bullshit. And it would be a comfort to understand that. Go get your B-rate drag queens that you're throwing a few pennies to make a joke about this. That didn't get on Drag Race. We're hoping you give them more views on Google Tube, CIA Tube. It's not going to change. Like, this is what these people confuse controlling reality with changing reality. Controlling what people believe about reality is not the same thing as changing reality. That still happened. I know it happened. So you can get all the like C-rate drag queens that will serve you to get like 20,000 views on YouTube, sad, to make a joke about this. It's not going to change reality that happened. And it won't make it any more true, your cult where you all chant like you believe in Satan as a symbol of only caring about yourself and money. It won't make that any more true either. So, you guys confuse being able to control the minds of the lowest consciousness people, which happen to be the most people, with actually changing reality, which we don't. So I've had too many experiences where the probability of something like this happening is so low, and how it ties in to my life, that I fucking know there's more than this shit. I couldn't be religious, but I also couldn't be a hardcore atheist. Yeah, you guys are wasting your lives.